Snipers, you have to see what's happening in the Bitcoin price right now. As I had to get outside and away from the charts because so much happened on the charts today. There's a lot to talk about today, a lot of puzzle pieces uncovering themselves. Smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm if you support these quick updates, and make sure to stay tuned until the end because so much happened today. Coinbase was up over 20%. The equities performed really well today, while the cryptocurrency market was a bit disappointing, but we got some puzzle pieces like MicroStrategy and ARK Innovation ETF. My personal position that I've been dollar cost averaging into buying the dip flipped into the green today. MicroStrategy is trading at the same price it was trading at when Bitcoin was at 36,000 US dollars. Is this institutional money front running a potential move that's about to happen for Bitcoin? We're going to talk about that today, snipers. A lot of puzzle pieces, and then we'll dive into the charts. But right now, what are the bulls saying and what are the bears saying? Because it's good to get both sides. And what you'll notice about the bulls is so far we are forming these higher lows very similar to how Bitcoin bottomed out in 2019 after the minor capitulation. Does that mean Bitcoin has bottomed out? Well, 22,500 is the major support right now, the previous weekly open. And as long as we hold above 22,500, if we break above 24,300, we could see a massive push to the upside for Bitcoin. Now, what about the macroeconomic environment that we're heading into? A lot of people are talking about the Fed's tightening up and inflation. Bitcoin has never been through this before. Well, in the past, if we were to assume what's about to come, we could say that maybe stagflation for the next few years is highly probable since we've already seen inflation and deflation. Well, in the past, during stagflation, gold has always been the best performing asset. Bitcoin, being the digital representation of gold, potentially is positioning itself, to see a lot of liquidity come into it during a time of uncertainty and stagflation. Could Bitcoin be the gold 2.0 for this next period of this macroeconomic environment that we're heading into? Well, let's look at some bullish on-chain indicators. Everyone's seen the MVRV ratio, or you've seen the realized price, or you've seen the stock to flow model, all indicating that Bitcoin has bottomed out. So we have all of the bottom indicators in place. The equity markets are giving Bitcoin the green light to see upside. Why isn't Bitcoin breaking above the $24,300 resistance level? Well, here's what the bears are saying. The bears are saying that just like what happened in the consolidation at 30,000 US dollars, Bitcoin is ready to topple over, and that it's going to fail to break out from its resistance, and that we're going to see another leg to the downside. Well, is this really a probable scenario? If the equity markets right now, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ above their 20-week moving average, is this a relief rally or is this a bottom? We don't know the answer to that yet, but this is what the bears are saying. And so we can protect ourselves from the bearish scenario by just understanding what the bears are looking at. And that's why 22,500 is an extremely important support level for us right now, because we do not want to be catching a falling knife if we start to sell off from there. Now, other bearish puzzle pieces, the US 2-year Treasury yield spiked today after the Feds reinforced their stance on tightening up. Now, could we just assume that the markets have already priced all of this in? I think so. Now, here's something that was kind of random today. I just want to throw out there to the market enthusiasts. Apple hit the highest level in history relative to the S&P 500 today. That was a very interesting puzzle piece, but let's dive into the chart, snipers, and connect all of the dots. Notice how MicroStrategy right now is trading at the same price that it was trading at back in late January of 2022 when Bitcoin was around 36,000 US dollars. As Kim.com likes to say, institutions want to front run Bitcoin by jumping into the equities that hold the most amount of Bitcoin. Is this a front run that we're potentially seeing right now with MicroStrategy pushing up? And Coinbase, notice how it was up 20% today. And so is this an early indication of where institutional money is going? We could just say that specifically, if we were to just look at MicroStrategy, all it did was go slightly above its 200-week moving average, just like Bitcoin. And because sometimes it trades at a discount, sometimes it trades at a premium, it's just seeing a delayed move here, right? Just above the 200-week moving average, very similar to Bitcoin. Now, let's pull up Bitcoin because you can see we are coming down to test the extremely important support level right now. Despite all of the fundamentals, despite all of the pieces that we talk about, The Bitcoin chart is a black and white chart to me. And right now, it is clear Bitcoin formed a higher high and is still finding resistance at 24,300 without closing any full 4-hour candles here. Does this mean we're going to be seeing downside? Well, the previous weekly open actually held us for the first move to the downside before we saw new consolidation highs. So the current previous weekly open at 22,500 is extremely important. If we break below that, then maybe we do see a move to the downside. But I think if we see a move to the downside right now, at least how the four-dimensional parts are looking, how the equity markets are looking, I think it would just be short-lived before we get back above 20,000. I think that Bitcoin is going to stay above 20,000 for now unless we start to see puzzle pieces fall apart. But if we do see downside, what I would assume is it's going to potentially be short-lived, and maybe the intentions there is to clear out some leveraged positions, and that's why we'll see downside. But if at any case Bitcoin breaks above 24,300, I do believe it will break out of this consolidation and move into a new range, potentially towards the $30,000 level, maybe even 35,000 US dollars. MicroStrategy is already trading at the same prices that it was trading at back during where Bitcoin was at 30,000 plus. If we look at the NASDAQ and the S&P 500, they've already reclaimed their consolidation that if Bitcoin were to just do the same thing, it would get to 30,000. So we have all of the green lights ahead right now, but Bitcoin is still clearly seeing resistance at 24,300. So let's continue to monitor this. The DXY made an interesting move today as it tried to get above 106.56, the major resistance right now, but it failed to do so. It got pushed back down. We did have a pretty bullish daily candle yesterday, and so we need to continue to monitor the DXY because a break above 106.56 is bearish for the equity markets and Bitcoin. But right now, it looks like the DXY is calming down. And the reason this is important is as long as the DXY doesn't form new highs, I do not think Bitcoin will retest the $17,600 level. And so far, it looks like the DXY is calming down. It is currently below the major resistance. It's not above it, so that's a good thing. Now, what's going on with the equity markets? The S&P 500, it did not break this high here. And why is this high at 4,200 for the E-mini futures contract important, snipers? It's because if we break this high, it's the first time we're actually forming a higher high. And because we're above the 20-week moving average, we could start to really make the case that this is a reversal and that we bottomed out. But the S&P 500 didn't do it, but guess who did do it today? The NASDAQ. The NASDAQ, potentially a leading indicator right now for what the S&P 500 has in store for us, it broke above this high. And so it's almost looking like it's ready to make a major move. Now, one thing that I'll say is very interesting about the NASDAQ is this white line is the 600-day moving average, and it was the bottom in March of 2020. But when the NASDAQ got above it, it did take some time. It went sideways a little bit before it really broke out. And so if we see something similar happen here, maybe we do see some sideways price action now that we've finally broke above the 600-day before we actually see the real move to the upside. So here's pretty much what's happening, snipers. Today, equities did very well. It looked like institutions front-ran Bitcoin by hopping into equities that hold a lot of Bitcoin. So we've pretty much seen a relief rally across the board. So there's two ways this can go for the bears and the bulls. Number one is the fact that Bitcoin may have been the asset to not see its relief rally just yet, and that sooner than later, if the equity markets and the equities that hold Bitcoin maintain the recent upside that they've seen, Bitcoin is going to follow by seeing upside itself and move towards that $30,000 range. Or the second idea here is that because Bitcoin has been underperforming the equity markets and we've finally seen every equity relieve themselves, that now potentially Bitcoin and the other equities are going to start to sell off. And if that's the case, we know what levels we're watching, 22,500 being that first major support level. If we break below that, it opens up the door all the way to 17,204, but I don't expect that to come on the table. But that doesn't mean a wick can't come in to clear out long positions, whatever it might be. Bitcoin is an extremely volatile asset. 20,000 would probably be the next major support level below the previous weekly open at 22,500 because that's the 2018 previous all-time high. So could we entertain long positions if Bitcoin breaks down to that level? Well, we don't want to be catching a falling knife. And so what's going to matter is, does the DXY break into new highs if that happens? Is the equity markets also showing that they're rolling back over. If that's the case, maybe you are catching a falling knife. There's a lot of sell pressure, 6-hour institutional sell volume. But if none of those pieces are on the table, we come down to 20,000 with light volume, everything else is still holding itself together outside of Bitcoin, then heck, maybe it's time to enter into a long position because we'll get another higher low and Bitcoin will see its continuation and eventually break 24,300. Those are the snares I think that are on the table right now. And just to wrap up, snipers, remember to smash like button for the YouTube algorithm if you support these updates. And I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments about the live streams versus these types of videos. So we talked about Bitcoin. We know the range that we're in. 24,300 is the major resistance. And then we have 22,500 as our major support. Let's talk about Ethereum really quick because this is actually very important here. It is testing 1597. This is the previous weekly open, just like 22,500 for Bitcoin. This is an extremely significant level for Ethereum because if it opens up this door, then 1440 comes next, the 2018 previous all-time high, or even potentially 1277. Ethereum is a volatile asset, a lot more volatile than Bitcoin due to its lower market cap. And so it is in a large range right now. The resistance is 1760. If we see any upside, that will open up the door to get us to 2000. But what's more important is Ethereum's performance against Bitcoin. This is the tall tale sentiment indicator of the cryptocurrency market. In my opinion, this leads all of the other altcoins. Similar to the S&P 500, it's yet to break this recent high. Continues to form lower highs. What are we monitoring right now? Well, number one is 65,000 Satoshis going to hold. A break of that confirms that this was a lower high. Or do we break this lower high in anticipation of the Ethereum merge on September 18th? And if that's the case, maybe we do see a parabolic run for Ethereum, an event of a lifetime, right? Whatever you want to call it. We'll let you guys know, snipers, for those tuned into the channel. And that's if we break 76,000 Satoshis to take out that high. But still quite neutral and undecided. And other than that, I will mention this because we keep talking about equities and Bitcoin. Let's look at Bitcoin against the S&P 500. It is currently holding this previous resistance as support. It's really testing it right now as I record this video. Let's monitor this because if we start to see this breakdown, that could be an early indicator that, okay, maybe Bitcoin's going to decouple and we're going to see a sell-off in the overall cryptocurrency market. Bitcoin dominance might spike up with that sell-off and it continues to underperform the equities. But if we are correct here that Twitter post talking about a stagflation environment and Bitcoin performing well in that environment is true, then we should start to see Bitcoin outperform the S&P 500. And so it is clearly underperforming because it formed a lower high versus the Bitcoin spot price against the US dollar forming a higher high. And so far it's not performing well, but we do not want to call this bearish just yet. What's clear though is if we look at the 200-week moving average, it looks like it's getting rejected from there, but we haven't really fell away from this area. Most of our weekly candles have held onto this 200-week moving average for Bitcoin against the SPY. So we'll continue to monitor that. International markets all within 1% of movement, so not much going on there. What a spectacular day for the tech sector today, specifically the equities that hold Bitcoin. I was surprised to see my MicroStrategy and ARK position just immediately get into the green because I've been buying the dip after dip after dip after dip, and I was fine being in the red. I had more capital to deploy. I had a cash position set in place to even buy up further dips, but it finally went into the green, and I was like, whoa, that's cool. I was like, wait, MicroStrategy is the same price it was at when Bitcoin's at 36,000. What's going on here? I remember a tweet by Kim.com, and this was when Bitcoin was at 36,000, and he said, oh my gosh, MicroStrategy, because at some point, it eventually, it started to trade at a discount back then. It wasn't maintaining that price. And it started to sell off like crazy. Bitcoin wasn't selling off. And he's like, are institutions front running a sell off in Bitcoin by selling off the equities that hold Bitcoin? That actually came true. Bitcoin then fell down to 17,600 after that. Now are we seeing the reverse in effect? We're seeing the institutions front run a potential push to the upside. Who knows? Those were some interesting puzzle pieces that I found in the charts today. And with that, thank you all for tuning into the Snipers channel for this Wednesday update. We have 2 more days left, business days, for the equity markets. So expect some volatility. I think the main thing that we want to see for the bulls heading into Friday is that the S&P 500 breaks that recent high. and that it maintains itself, especially those equities that hold Bitcoin, they maintain the gains that they've recently seen. So we don't just call it a relief rally, a potential reversal, and then eventually it could give Bitcoin the breathing room it needs to move up higher. If we start to see things sell off, we know what we're watching for Bitcoin. 22,500, the major sniper support, the previous weekly open. If that door opens, expect volatility to the downside. If 24,300 breaks at any point, if we see a $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 move for Bitcoin, 24,300 is where it's going to start. So that's the major resistance. If we break above that, 28,000, 30,000, 35,000, all comes on the table. 20-week moving average for Bitcoin right around 30,000 right now. So S&P 500 is above it. The NASDAQ's above it. Let's see what happens to Bitcoin. And until next time, I appreciate each and every one of you tuned in the channel. And I will see you guys on the next video. Snipers.